Welcome back to Mean Streets, the podcast where we investigate the best, worst, and forgotten movies of film noir and more. I'm Luke Deckard.
And I'm Matthew Booth.
And we are your cinematic sleuths, and it's time to crack another case. This case is a little bit different. It's one with shades of noir, but not full-blown noir. So, Matt, what do we have on the docket today?
Well, today's docket is 1996's Mission Impossible, starring Tom Cruise, Jon Voight, and Emmanuella Béart. Written by David Koepp, Robert Towne, and Steven Zaillian, and directed, of course, by Brian De Palma. IMDb's longline is: an American agent under false suspicion of disloyalty must discover and expose the real spy without the help of his organization. Mission Impossible.
Mission Impossible, the one of the last remaining, a strong rival for the Bond franchise at the time. He came out a year after GoldenEye, and continues to rival Bond, and in many ways, today probably surpasses Bond.
Absolutely. Do you know what? I watched this with my wife a couple of days before the show, and I said, "Do you know what? I would watch that. In fact, all of the Mission Impossible films, good and bad. I'd rather watch these than almost all of the Daniel Craig tenure of James Bond."
Yeah,
I think this is what this film and its successors, I think, are what Bond should really go back to being.
Yeah,
bit of fun, bit of character, good action sequences.
Yes, well, the missing ingredient in Daniel Craig is fun.
It's fun. Yeah,
they're so dour and mopey and grumpy and moody that it's like, I can only handle that level of, like, it worked for Casino Royale, but you need to
lighten it up,
tweak your formula a little bit to add a bit more fun, and the Craig Bonds particularly just, this is why I love Pierce Brosnan's Bond, because he's fun. He's fun.
I genuinely think that in years to come, the Brosnan films will be reevaluated in the way that the Dalton films have been reevaluated.
Yeah,
and will probably succeed the Daniel Craig films in terms of popularity, in terms of longevity.
Yeah,
for the reasons that we'll get into about this film. They are well constructed, preposterous thrillers. And
I mean, until you get to the world's No Time.
Die Another Day.
Die Another Day. All these stupid names with die in it. Yeah, Die Another Day is the first 30 minutes is fine until Bond is escaping from his captors, and then it just becomes a little ludicrous nonsense. But
I quite like the sword fight in the Gentleman's Club, but
yeah,
I can't be doing with Bond surfing a tsunami.
No,
and I certainly can't be doing with invisible cars. Good God.
But that's another film.
That's another film. That's another show.
Do you remember when you first saw Mission Impossible and what your initial thoughts were at the time? Did it leave an imprint on you? Because it did for me.
Yeah, I saw this at the cinema. I remember seeing this at the cinema, and I'd seen episodes of, but was never a huge fan of the TV series. And that's not said I wasn't a huge fan because I didn't like it. It was just something that I didn't watch enough of it to say that I was a huge fan. When I saw it, I enjoyed the ones I saw, and I went to the pictures to see this because I thought it would just be exactly what we've just said, a sort of Bond knockoff that would pass a couple of hours, and it did. And I remember having a really good time watching it then in 1996, and having a really good time every time I've seen it since.
Yeah,
including for this review.
Yeah. For me, it was I think around 1998-ish when I first saw it. I bought the VHS. We were in this back when I lived in the States. We were in Indianapolis at I don't remember what the record store or entertainment store would have been called at the time, Sam Goody or something like that, probably. But we were looking at all the films, and I was, oh, what looks good? Can I get something? And I came across Mission Impossible, and my parents like, oh yeah, it used to be a TV show when we were kids, and and so I was like, oh, well, I was at my, not my peak, but I was really into Bond at this time. So anything spy related, I was very keen on and wanted to get a hold of. And just looking at the cover, I was like, the poster is cool. And then reading
Yeah.
the back, I was like, this sounds awesome. And my parents were like, all right, fine. We'll get it. We'll watch it when we get home. I was like, all right, fantastic. So, and I remember we were stuck in Indianapolis for the whole weekend because they were doing something. And I just remember sitting in the hotel room, just like reading the back of the VHS over and over and over, just dying to like find out what this movie is about. Like, I wanted to know who Ethan Hunt was. I wanted to know all this stuff because while obviously I'd seen all the Bond films up until that point, Mission Impossible I was aware of, like I knew the music, but it was unlike other TV shows or kind of shows from the 60s and 70s. Mission Impossible wasn't like on reruns as much when I was
Mm,
a kid, so it was one that I didn't get to see very often.
yeah.
So I knew very little about the actual TV show at the time of watching this film. Um, but yeah, we went home, watched it, and I loved every second of it. It
Yeah.
was fun,
And
thrilling. I thought Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt was he's the hero you want to be. He's
yeah,
he's
he's a good old fashioned Hollywood hero.
yes,
You
yes,
know.
and I love that. And they say Tom Cruise is like the last action hero. And to some degree, like I mean, we've talked about this in the past, but like to some degree, I do agree. But then you think of other people like we've talked about Ryan Gosling being like a classic Hollywood
Yeah.
actor and stuff.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I get the hype of Cruise, but Cruise is definitely the end of a particular era, though,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure.
I mean, he was unstoppable in the 80s. Well, in the 90s, he was unstoppable.
Yes,
But one of the
Top Gun
reasons
onwards.
yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons I wanted to see this film as well was obviously De Palma because
Mm,
I'd been a fan of things like Carrie, uh, and Dress to Kill is one of my favorite films, which is his
yeah,
sort of Psycho ripoff. Um, and films like Scarface, obviously, and Body Double, and The Untouchables. I mean, he's not 10 years previously, perhaps 9 years previously, he'd done The Untouchables, which is, and again, I think a really good piece of Hollywood
mm,
cake, and
definitely.
so De Palma was a big attraction for me going to see this,
Yeah,
and to see what he could do with. I mean, it's as close as you get to a De Palma Bond film, and it was interesting to me back in 1996 to see what he would do with this sort of material, having
yeah,
seen what he does with horror and psychological suspense.
yeah,
See and with the crime thriller with The
mm,
Untouchables. See what would he do with spies,
yeah.
and this is what we got. And I remember coming out with a big grin on my face, coming out of the theater with a big grin on my face.
Yes, yes. That's what you
It's
want
that
from a
sort of
movie.
film. It's that sort
Yes,
of film.
yes. It's. I mean, there's lots of criticism, which we'll dive into later. But like, lots of criticisms about the plot and things like that. But I'm not sure some of that is entirely warranted. I think it is. I've never been confused by this film, but some people are. Which there are elements that could have been better developed, but I don't think the plot is necessarily confusing. However, there is a stark difference watching this on a VHS that is made to fit your TV. For no one beyond like I don't know. If you're 30 and younger, you're not going to know what the hell I'm talking about probably. But back in the day, we didn't have widescreen TVs, we had box TVs, and when they would release movies that were in the cinema that were widescreen, they would often cut it to be made for your box TV rather than widescreen. And I remember owning Star Trek First Contact, and we bought the widescreen version. And I remember being annoyed by it because I was like, it's so small, like I can't see, it didn't translate well on from widescreen on a box TV. You know what I mean?
Mm, yeah,
Um, so a lot of these movies were done, and then with Mission Impossible, of course, that was the case. And when I bought the DVD, so around year 2000, was moving from VHS to DVD. Mission Impossible was, of course, one of the first DVDs I wanted because I loved this movie, and I, pardon me, and I wanted that on DVD. I was like, I want the quality, I want the superior quality, And
yeah, yeah,
I rewatched it, and this was also interesting. Back in the day, this DVD was two sided. One side was the full screen version, and then one side was the widescreen version. Um, I watched the widescreen version, and it changed the perception of the film that I originally had for one big reason. In one of the opening scenes where Mr. Phelps, Jim Phelps, is telling his team what the mission is going to be, what their roles are going to be. There's a
Yeah.
scene where he is talking with his wife Claire, and he's like, "You drive around here, you park here, blah 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 blah." In the widescreen version, the character of Hannah is cut out completely. You do not see her at all. In the widescreen version, she's standing there right next to Claire. And as this film goes on, well, Mr. Phelps and Claire are, spoiler alert, they're the
Yeah.
baddies. So
Yeah.
when we rewatched it with that, we just those two together,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, actually, this doesn't make sense because they would have been in on it together. But now having Hannah in the picture, you're like, oh, right. So this is them now. This scene makes more sense. Whereas previously, it really didn't. It
Yeah.
really didn't. So it's nowadays everything is widescreen. There is no more made to fit your TV because widescreen is just the standard viewing. But it's interesting to realize, wow, your whole experience, like whole characters are cut out of scenes
in a slightly different context and a slightly different effect. The same thing happened when I saw Halloween for the first time on widescreen. Because even in the VHS version, I'd always known there's a scene where he escapes from the mental hospital. Michael Myers escapes from the mental hospital, and he kills a pickup truck driver, and that's how he gets the famous overalls.
Yes.
And there's a chord of Carpenter's music when the body is seen. But in the VHS business, you can't see the body. In the VHS version, it's just like a chord of music for no reason. You think, I wonder why it's done that. When you see it on the widescreen, you see the corpse, the mutilated corpse. And the bit at the end when he's trapped them in the house, and Jamie Lee Curtis thinks she's killed him downstairs, and then he appears behind them. On the VHS, that was always a shock. That was like a jump scare. But on the widescreen, you can see him coming up the stairs, so it becomes a much more suspense shot. So it is interesting that these different formats can create totally different experiences.
Yes, that's true. It's nuts. It is absolutely nuts.
It is.
I think it was maybe about a year or so ago. I rewatched Mission Impossible. I rewatched all of them just for kicks.
Yeah, so did we.
Yeah, and it struck me how colored by film noir the first one and a little bit of the second one are. There was lots and lots of noir there, and it sort of makes sense because I mean we recently did From Russia with Love with our buddies over at Spy Hards, and it's very obvious that films like Notorious, Clear and Present Danger, Casino Royale, they all spy movies were the next like stage after your PI black and whites. It went to spy movies, and a lot of the themes carried over. A lot of the style carried over, even though they're moving into color and stuff like that. There is a lot of sort of heavy influence. I think noir and Mission Impossible, this one particularly, it has the suspense, it has the mystery, it has the femme fatale. Character wise, it has the corrupted officials. It has a lot of the ingredients. It has a very bleak attitude, even though this is a very fun movie. The actual attitude of it is a very bleak. There is no
definitely.
good anywhere because everyone is dead. Your hero is a villain. Your hero's wife is a villain, and the man who's meant to be running the CIA is also a little bit of a dick. So it's sort of like it really. It also, in terms of like a mystery, I don't really see Ethan Hunt as like, he's a bit kind of like Bond, where he's not. I guess what is a spy? A spy is basically a detective. He's just out there shaking trees to see what falls, to see what stirs, to see who he can bring out of the dark. And that is a lot of what he is doing in this film.
He does a lot of that in this film.
Yes.
He does a lot of more so, I think, than in any of the others. This he's
100%.
very much a detective in this film, and he is like a private eye in this because he's on his own. He's cut off from the facilities that the organization has, so he's got to use his wits and he's got to use his charm, which why Cruise is good casting for Ethan Hunt.
Yes.
He's got to use his charm, and in the scene with Vanessa Redgrave, where he's got the balaclava on, which we'll come on to.
Yeah,
he's very charming in that, and sometimes Cruise's good looks work for him.
Yes,
and in this film they do, but he's very much a lone wolf, which is what people like Marlowe are. Philip Marlowe is. So this is the most noir of all these films, definitely.
Yeah. Two is probably the next, and then after 2, I would say it goes away entirely. Two is obviously famously was meant to be a modern version of Notorious, the Cary Grant film. That was the original idea, and some of that translated into the final product. But it's weird because 2 gets a lot of flack as being the worst, but it made a ton of money. It was huge. 2 was a very big film that, because of critic response maybe or something, it was just sort of like, oh well, that was not as good, or it was 2 is a weird one that was actually a pretty big hit that was then reconsidered not to be a hit.
Do you rate 2? Do you rate it?
Yes, I like 2 better than the most recent one. I rather watch Mission Impossible 2 than Dead Reckoning.
I've
Dead
never
Reckoning
understood why.
Say again.
I've never understood. I was just saying, I've never understood why 2 gets the rap it does. It can only, it's not as good as the first one. Well, a lot of sequels aren't.
I think it's the Ethan Hunt in 1 and 2 are kind of not the same Ethan Hunt. This Ethan Hunt 2 is doing these incredible ninja flips and kicks and things, and they go a bit kind of crazy with that. But also, the original plan for Mission Impossible was for every film to be done by a new director and have a different style. So it wasn't meant to be like, your Batman movies or whatever, where it's like, this is just the style of or James Bond, where this is just the style of the franchise. It was going to be a bit more dynamic. And I think 1, 2, if you watch 1, 2, and 3, you can see 3 very different versions of Ethan Hunt and the
definitely.
Mission Impossible ingredients being, taken over by a different director and a different approach. And I think it works pretty well. I mean, there's some silliness in number 2, but we'll save that for another day because we'll cover 2 at some point.
The final punch up goes on for about
the jousting on motorcycles. Yeah. Oh man. So I guess we can go behind the camera and talk about how this film got made, because there's a lot of juicy
There's a lot of stuff in there.
Yes. So this thing cost around $80 million to make, and its box office return was 457.7 million. Like,
fair to say it made its money.
Yes. So this thing was the highest pre-Memorial Day, had the highest pre-Memorial Day gross, beating the Return of the Jedi. That's massive. It grossed 75 million in 6 days, which beat Jurassic Park, which over its first 6 days took 56 million. That's huge. And it stayed in the number 1 spot for a couple of weeks until The Rock beat it off.
Rock.
Man. So it was a I remember when the thing is, despite not seeing it until a couple years later, I do remember just being a kid and seeing the iconography. I remember seeing the trailers, and I knew that it was a thing that was sort of out there,
Yeah.
And so it was, so this was a massive success. It was a huge pop culture hit, absolutely massive hit. But we had Brian De Palma behind the director's, in the director's chair, and I think he did a really good job, sort of playing with a lot of elements from the TV show, to some degree. But and also like peppering in that Hitchcockian aspect, which I think kind of is partly where some of the noiriness comes from. That and Robert Towne, I think are
Robert Towne,
the reasons there's a bit more of a noir influence into this. Because what I love about this is it doesn't look like or feel like a Bond movie, and I could see this being so easy to imitate not Casino Royale, GoldenEye. And it just doesn't do it. It is its own sort of flavor of spy thriller that I just thought was wonderful. Mean Streets will return right after this. Who doesn't love a good boxing movie? Well, Steve Hunt presents the Boxing Movie Podcast. On each episode, Steve and his guests discuss a movie that has boxing as a theme. Do not be put off if you're not a fan of boxing, though. Of course, he covers the likes of Rocky and the sequels, but the depth of boxing-themed movies across cinema history is much greater than you might imagine. Boxing Movie Podcast has covered the early works of Hitchcock, explored the world of blaxploitation cinema and the golden age of film noir, with episodes covering The Setup, Champion, and Stanley Kubrick's Killer's Kiss. You might not have previously considered yourself a boxing movie fan, but after listening to a few episodes of the Boxing Movie Podcast, you may have to reconsider that view. Find the Boxing Movie Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. If you love Mean Streets, join us on Patreon and get exclusive perks, insider access, and a chance to shape the show.
Depending on the tier of your choice, get early episode access, your name in the credits, and have your questions read on air.
You can help us choose films for us to review, unlock exclusive commentaries and reviews, and join our members-only YouTube Live Q&As.
So slip on your trench coats, pull your fedoras down, and join us on Patreon today. Yeah, in fact, I mean, like I said earlier, I don't get the sense when you watch this film, I don't get the sense that you think, well, they're copying Bond here. No. Quite the opposite. I get the feeling, as I said, of I wish Bond would do this.
Yeah.
So it's almost the other way around, Yeah. Whereas it was so obvious in some of Daniel Craig's films, the second one, I think, particularly, that they were copying Bourne.
Bourne film.
Blatantly obvious.
Even from Casino. Casino was a reaction to Bourne. Casino itself was a reaction to Bourne.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This has none of that feeling for me. Like I say, if anything, it's the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is its own thing. It's doing similar things to Bond, but it's its own entity completely. And I think De Palma's probably responsible for a lot of that.
I think so. So Paramount had the rights to the film for a very long time, and they were having little success getting it off the ground until Cruise stepped in. Now, Cruise is reported to have said that he loved the franchise since he was a kid, and therefore was interested in developing Mission Impossible. And at first was sort of told no, you're crazy, but made it happen. And he wanted to produce it with his brand new production company, the Cruise Wagner production.
Cruise Wagner, yeah.
And then they ended up getting a budget of around 70-ish million. Cruise is very interesting because he really takes a lot of creative control with his projects.
Yeah. From
finding the writers, finding directors, things like that. Once he's sort of in the picture, he is very, very hands-on. And so
I don't think you can argue with Cruise's commitment, can you? Once he's decided he's going to do it, he goes all in, doesn't he? Definitely.
He does. So I got to respect him for that. So he was aware of Brian De Palma. He met him at a dinner party with Steven Spielberg, and then went home and rewatched all of his movies.
Watched all his films.
And then was like, you're the one who's going to direct this movie. And then he made that happen.
Yeah.
He just makes it happen. Excuse me.
He's Hollywood gold, isn't he?
Yes. Of course, interestingly, De Palma did turn down Mission Impossible too, because apparently De Palma was like, we don't need more than one of these movies, which is such it's an interesting concept because that is so foreign in today's market. You barely just get just one, they just released the trailer for Tron 3.
Oh, God. I mean, I've always been amazed that we didn't get an Untouchables 2. And I wonder if De Palma said the same thing.
Maybe
we've caught lightning in a bottle. We'll never do it again. he
Yes.
strikes me as that sort of man. We've done that, move on.
Yes. Yeah. So Paramount went through a couple of different screenplays that just weren't connecting. And then De Palma was the one who brought Steve and David on.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. So with Steve Zaillian, uh, he has a really good a list of credits to his name. I mean, Clear and Present Danger, Schindler's List, and one of his first was the Falcon and the Snowman, which didn't click with me until, and then I realized there's that new, well, not new anymore, but there's the Marvel show Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, they clearly aped off of that title for this,
Yeah.
for their
Yeah.
for their show. But he also wrote The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo with Daniel Craig, and he wrote The Irishman, the Martin Scorsese 3-hour epic on Netflix. So he's, incredible credits. No,
And he did Ripley. He did Ripley for Netflix.
Oh, did he? Well, I hate Ripley, so he
Yeah,
lost
yeah.
me. He lost me.
I think we have to just sort of give the full picture there for you, Luke.
Yeah. I'll say that is probably an instance where it's production is producers are dictating certain things, and that was Ripley. We'll talk about Ripley another day.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
But he only had 6 weeks, so he worked on the script with De Palma for 6 weeks and then was done. So they needed to bring in some more help, and that's where Robert Towne entered the picture. Towne was then brought in to work on this script. David was brought on for a while, but then was let go before production actually started because Paramount was worried that it was going to cost too much money. But then he was eventually rehired back on. But again, he has incredible credits as well. I mean, Death Becomes Her is a fantastic movie. Jurassic Park and The Lost World, which not only did he co-write The Lost World, but he was also the second unit director. And I know Jurassic Park 2 gets a lot of flack, but it's the second best. Everything else afterwards is pretty much crap. He wrote The Shadow, which, that was a dud, but it's that sort of pulpy PI kind of stuff. Spider-Man. Yep. Did Secret Window. He also directed that, which was Johnny Depp film, which based off a Stephen King story, which I really like Secret Window. I think I like
Secret Window.
It's a good movie.
I like
It's a good movie. I think it's underrated.
Very
and he
much
did.
So.
He also wrote or co-wrote Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which is a film in recent years, particularly after Dial of Destiny, I have turned around on massively.
I have.
Yeah.
I still can't stand the kid, but
you know what? I don't mind him now. He's much easier to stomach nowadays than when it first happened. But one of the big things was they re-released the films on 4K, and in the 4K restoration of Crystal Skull, they got rid of, in the original release, everything had this sort of yellowy, bluey tint to it. It didn't look like an Indiana Jones movie.
No.
Which was a huge problem. They cut all that out. Just that it's just normal Indiana. So it now feels like, just visually, it feels more like an Indiana Jones movie because this weird color grading has been eradicated, which helps immensely. But then also, I'm a big fan of the podcast Astonishing Legends, and they dive into all of the weird, like supernatural alien stuff that is Indiana Jones is coming across in this film. And it then sort of clicked with me more. It's like, oh no, actually Indiana Jones and aliens or interdimensional beings, it does actually make sense for the franchise. Like, the second movie is about magical stones and guys ripping your heart out of your chest. Like, it's actually, it does fit the trashy pulpiness of what Indiana Jones was, that's my Jones rant. But anyway, David is another fantastic writer on this. And of course, then you got Robert Towne with Chinatown fame and The Two Jakes, and collaborated with Cruise on Days of Thunder, The Firm, and then also went on to work on Mission Impossible 2 as well. So some really heavy hitters on the writing team, I think. But it wasn't an easy journey for them.
No,
it wasn't. David particularly has commented on it being the production of it being sort of not enjoyable, very, very, very chaotic, and a lot of ego in the room. So you're not only are you fighting with probably Tom Cruise, but you De Palma and Robert Towne.
Robert Towne. Robert Towne was a big personality.
Yes.
So
Yes.
and De Palma is also well, not notoriously, that's perhaps a bit strong, but he is known for being difficult to work with.
Yes.
And we know that Tom Cruise is like master of all he surveys. So
Yes.
even at this stage, he was making inroads into being what he has become today.
Yes.
So he's a massive star at this stage. So to say that there are a lot of egos in the room, I think is perhaps an understatement. You know what I mean?
I think so. Interestingly, David did go on to say that he thought the film was well directed and looked good, but he does admit that he thinks the story suffers from uh you know uh, flowing issues. It doesn't flow like he wanted it to flow, and the sort of, I mean, we talk about this sometimes as well, that too many writers, too many cooks in the kitchen kind of
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
And I think he sort of hints that, or strongly implies that that is also one of the problems of Mission Impossible 1 is you're using his idea, this guy's idea, Tom's idea, blah, 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 and you're sort of kind of hodgepodging this together, and
Mm.
the clarity of vision narratively became a bit foggy. And I am inclined to agree with that. I don't know about you.
In part, I think.
Mm,
In part, I don't. It's not a film where I think. I agree with you. People do say the plot is confusing. I've never found it confusing, to be quite
no,
honest.
no.
And it doesn't suffer so much for me, that bloated feel of too many ideas. There's not many. We've talked about films on this podcast before where things aren't developed because they run out of time, or plot lines don't go anywhere, and they're left over from other people's ideas. I never really get a sense of that with this, to be quite honest.
See, I do, but it's on a
In which
particular point.
bits?
But I'll get to. Well, finish
All
your
right,
thought,
okay.
and then I'll get there.
All
Yeah,
right, okay. Okay. I'll be interested to
yeah,
see what it is.
yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll get there very, very, very shortly. But no, it's. I think there is a fogginess to it, but I think the general mystery makes sense in that
Yeah, I think the general mystery makes sense.
Phelps is behind it. He's manipulating this stuff.
Yeah.
Claire pushes Ethan to hire Krieger, who is involved with the overall thing,
The overall
and
plot, yeah.
Phelps wants the money from Max, and so enter Ethan Hunt. He's now upsetting the order of things,
Mhm.
and Claire's sort of also trying to steer Ethan in a particular direction once she re-enters the picture. Um, and I think and so I think when it comes to maybe the shuffling of ideas and the lack of clarity in following the story, is that certain elements you have to read a lot into Claire's story that isn't there on the screen. And I think she's one of the big sort of, for me, she's one of the main problems. But we'll get there in detail shortly, though.
All right, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so Robert Towne originally said that he found the experience enjoyable. Um, and then there are reports out there that then sort of he kind of backtracked on that and said it was rather tough. He said he got Chinatown flashbacks because they made him change the ending again.
Again.
He had an
Yeah.
ending in mind, and they were like, "No, we want to use this train sequence ending. You have to do that." And so, he wanted. He said he wanted to do something more like the Maltese Falcon, which again, it's like you can, like I said, you can feel the noir influences, and
You
I do
can,
think a
yeah,
lot of that
yeah.
is from Town. Um, but yeah, so he lost out on his ending once again. Whatever that ending is, I couldn't find it, but I would really like to know what he was cooking up. What he was cooking up.
Well,
Um,
you can bet your life it'll be something really good.
Yes, I think so. But at the same time, the ending was better for
It'll be
Chinatown
something
than
worth
what.
seeing.
Yes, yes. Um, again, interestingly,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
this film did go into production without a finished script, and that is always a big red flag.
A
No
big
finished
red
script is
flag.
like,
Yeah,
yeah, it's like,
yeah.
ooh, oh dear, oh
That is
dear.
always worrying.
Yes. And again, that kind of you see it with the Pirates of the Caribbean films and many, many others. But like when that happens, you can kind of feel it. You're racing, you're riding against the clock. And that's not something you really want to be doing because you're not going to get your best, I don't think, in that
No,
kind
you
of
don't. Well, you
situation.
don't, do you? You don't. If you have to
No.
quickly churn something out, it's never going to be your best work because you've not had time to polish it and also not a chance to make sure it fits with. This is always my take on unfinished scripts going into production. By the time
Mm,
you're writing the ending as the filming's catching up with you,
yes.
there's not always a guarantee. You can't ever have the guarantee that what you're writing now will fit into what you wrote however many months or years ago,
Yes.
in pre-production. So
Yes.
sometimes that is obvious when a film is playing out that the climax makes no sense
Yeah.
compared to
Yes.
what was, the first hour of the film, say.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
and
No,
it's generally
definitely.
because they've had to do it on the hoof.
Yes, yeah. So, this film did well to not make it necessarily. I don't feel. I mean, I know what I've just said a second ago, but like it didn't feel as sloppy as like say something like Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3. It still felt pretty cohesive. But Mission Impossible's one of the franchise's main things is they come up with the actions pieces first, and then basically write a story that fits around them. So here's action piece 1, here's action piece 2. You need to
Yeah.
get this to all make sense somehow.
Well, that's
And
something that Towne said, didn't he? He just wrote
yes.
a beginning, a middle, and an end to hang the action sequences on.
Yes. Yes.
So
And I think, for example, I mean, it's a formula that has worked mostly for the franchise until you get to Dead Reckoning, where it is a bunch of really cool action set pieces that just go on and on and on, and I lose interest. And it's the first Mission Impossible movie that I've lost interest in. 'Cause I'm
yeah,
just like, I don't this is everything is going on 3 to 5 minutes too long, and I just don't care anymore.
yeah.
Like,
I think that's a product of the filmmaking business
yeah,
overall. I mean,
yes.
the later Mission Impossible films push 2.5 hours, maybe even 3. And this comes
The
in under
Dead
2.
Reckoning does, yeah. I don't know
Is
if
Dead Reckoning the
if
one that's split in 2? Is that part 1
yes,
and
that's
part 2?
now not 2. That's now they've gotten rid of part 1 and 2 now. It's still a sequel to it, but it's
Right.
they backtracked quickly on that because the part 1, part 2 thing was not working in their favor. So they
No, I don't think any film needs to be split over 2. You
no,
know,
no, no,
that
no.
says flabby story or
Yes. Well,
lot
they
of
were going
padding.
for the
Say,
Avengers route. They wanted Avengers Endgame. What is it? Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame is what they were going for with
right?
Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning 1 and 2. And I mean, there's a clear better film in the Avengers finale, and it's the first one. The second one is just 3 hours of fighting. I'm like, I'm bored,
Yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
Dead Reckoning had that same sort of problem where it's like, well, this isn't even very good. It's a lot of rehash. It's things I've seen before in this franchise that isn't. I'm not interested in this, so it has that problem for me.
Yeah,
But it worked pretty well up until Dead Reckoning. I think Fallout is a great movie that should have been the end of the franchise. Then let them, let it cool and then start over again.
mm.
Um, but it worked up until that point, I think.
Yeah, I do. I do. I tend to get mixed up which one's which.
Fallout's the one with Henry Cavill, which is
Yeah,
the
I
only
liked.
good role
Yeah,
that Henry Cavill's ever had.
absolutely. Yeah, 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 yeah. I thought that was a good one, and I know why you're saying that could have just ended the whole thing. I agree
It
with that.
definitely,
I
it
agree with
really
that.
should have. It really should have. It was that's one I could watch almost any time, even though that is like it does push over 2 hours. It's one that I'm always happy to watch.
Yeah,
So
I'm always happy to watch any of these. I've not seen Dead Reckoning because I
okay,
was waiting. I was waiting for part 2 to come out. But if
this summer,
so I'll finally watch it like towards the end of this year, probably. Then, so
Yes. Yeah.
But all the ones that I've seen, all the others, and like you said earlier, my wife and I went through we just watched from beginning to end, like from number 1 down to number whatever it is,
Mm.
and we watched. I don't know, what was it, one a night or something, and we just it was. I was always excited.
Yeah.
To sit down and watch them again. Say, we can't wait to watch the next one tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's what these films are really good at. You know,
Yes.
I can't say that about a lot of films. I have to say,
No.
you know, because in many cases I agree with De Palma. Like the Avengers was a good film, and that's enough for me. Thanks. You know.
Yes.
The rest of them, I think, well, why are we doing this again? Because they just try and when they try and up the game and it's too much action and not enough character, you do lose it, and action seems to become boring. You know, they do become boring.
Yes.
So
when your finale for Avengers, you know, the Marvel Universe is a being who is eradicating half of life in the entire universe, how do you top that?
How do you top that?
You know, if every finale is world ending, how do you top that? And that's the problem that like the Star Trek movies, the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies have. It's that same sort of world ending stuff. If your first movie is blowing up Vulcan, where do you go?
Where do you go from that? Yeah, where do you go from there? That's absolutely true. It's absolutely true.
Like just dial it back. And I think this is why another reason why I love this film and some of the subsequent sequels is it's never like world-ending threats.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's still serious threats.
The threat is serious, but and it will have devastating consequences, but it won't blow up the world.
No. And again, I think that's kind of why Fallout worked so well for me, because that is, while there is an atomic bomb element to, I think, the previous film, they sort of repurposed that a little bit for Fallout, but I think it worked much better. And I sort of, that's why I sort of feel like that one could have been the ending, because
could have been the end of it. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Because where do you go? You know, there was only one place that James Bond could go after going into space, wasn't there? And that was hurtling right back down to Earth.
Yes.
So the next film is For Your Eyes Only. That's a Cold War thriller. You know, and that's
that's
the only thing you can do after Invisible Cars and Tsunami surfing.
Yes.
You can only go back down to Earth. So you get Casino Royale, and that seems to me the only sensible thing you can do. But these films, like this, is a very. I mean, in its first film, it's a very personal mission, isn't it? For Hunt.
Yeah.
So this is a good foundation to build on. So, but then the threats, as I remember, they become sort of increasingly more dangerous as the films go on.
Yes.
And that's the right trajectory to go on, I think.
Yes.
You know, there's no falling down then. There's no sort of taking a step back. You're going in the right direction.
Yes.
To the ultimate threat in Fallout and the series.
Yeah.
Perfect trajectory.
Because number 2 is the virus.
Yeah.
Drama, which I quite enjoyed. Number 3 is the J.J. Abrams rabbit's foot bullshit, where you don't know what the MacGuffin is, but it's just dangerous, which worked it well enough to kind of revitalize the franchise a bit. The fourth one, I kind of get 4 in. I kind of forget what 4 is a lot of the time. And
now,
then
which is 4?
I think 4 is. Let me look it up. Because this is the other problem.
Ghost Protocol.
Yes.
Brad Bird.
Yes. Mission. Yes. So that's it. So I don't remember what Ghost Protocol's. I think Ghost Protocol is the one with the thwarted whatchamacallit, the thwarted nuclear missile, actually. I think. And then Rogue Nation is the one where they like blow up the Kremlin and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's what this is the problem. This is the thing. 1, 2, and 3, because they're 3 distinct directors and visions, I remember them better. But once you get to 4 and 5, and then 6, I guess, because it's the same, they kind of then like solidify a style for the franchise.
Yeah,
They're
that's
harder to
absolutely right.
differentiate.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That because they do blend into one for me, and
Yes.
I then start to remember scenes.
Yes.
So I remember this. I remember a scene where Hunt is handcuffed to or tied to a post, and a female agent comes in to rescue him, and she starts getting kicked around, and he just sort of stomach crunches up to the top of the post, and then
Yes.
frees himself. Now I have no idea
Yes.
which film that is, but I remember
Exactly.
that being a great. I remember sort of cheering in my seat, saying, "Come
Yeah.
on, this is ace,"
Yeah.
but I've no idea which film it is.
Yes.
And that's my
I
problem with
remember the
some of
scene, but
these
I can't
films.
remember either.
But you know which scene I mean, don't you?
Yes. 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 That one might be 4. I'm not sure though. Someone in the comments can tell us. So
Someone in the comments can tell us. Yeah.
interestingly enough, though, the response to Mission Impossible was pretty good. It wasn't a 50-50 kind of split with critics. Some critics didn't like it. Some called it, said it had empty thrills, but had some suspense, and sort of, didn't really have, any character or personality or color to the dialogue. Others were like, no, it was stylish and brisk and fun and blah blah blah. So it had a, kind of a strong critic response. I guess was a little bit mixed, but it wasn't panned by any means.
No.
The harshest critics, I think, came from the original cast, and they hated this movie.
Yeah.
And I kind of don't disagree with them, because this ties into some of my problems with this film generally.
Right. Okay.
So
Martin Landau especially hated it, I think.
Martin Landau did. Yes, he was not happy with it all. Greg Morris, who played Barney Collier in the original show, walked out of the theater because of what they did with the character of Mr. Phelps. Mr. Phelps, played by Peter Graves, a fantastic actor who I always thought, why didn't they get him back? When I was a kid,
Yeah,
I
I
was like,
don't know.
he's over on Seventh Heaven.
Yeah.
Shitty little show playing Captain Deckard from Star Trek: The Motion Picture's dad. Like why isn't he? Why didn't he come and do this?
I don't know. He would have been great in it as well.
He was asked to, but said no because of what they did to his character.
Ah, right.
And I was like, that makes sense, because
Yeah.
again, I came into Mission Impossible not being weighed down by the franchise's history. Now, I'm the kind of person that I can watch the new thing, but then when I go back and watch things from the beginning, I then kind of recontextualize certain things, particularly this aspect of turning Mr. Phelps into a traitor, into a villain. It's like making M the villain of the movie and Bond.
Yeah.
And while it felt like a very 90s shocking thing to do, I do think it was the wrong thing to do, frankly.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, it's just the desire to have a twist, isn't it?
Mm.
It's that was something in the 90s. With films like The Usual Suspects and all that sort of stuff. The big twist, and The Sixth Sense, was that the 90s? I think that was the 90s. Yeah, it was. These twist endings were popular then.
Yes.
But I mean, if you know your crime fiction, if you know your Agatha Christie's, this sort of twist is ages old.
Oh yeah, no, it is. Yes.
It's not that much of a twist if you bear all that sort of stuff in mind. The idea that
no, it's not.
the
But
idea that the boss is going to be the villain.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've sort of seen that, haven't we?
We have, but I guess the problem with Mission Impossible is in some ways this is meant to be the continuation of the franchise. And so anyone who's grown up watching Mission Impossible, watching Peter Graves, Mr. Phelps, their hero, suddenly becomes this bitter, twisted, and it in some ways, like, I get why they wanted to do it. I get sort of that 90s disillusionment that, the Cold War's over. There's this sort of where do we go? Where do we go? These, I used to be a big dog. I'm not a big dog. I've given my life for this organization and they've given me nothing. Like, I sort of get the why they went down that avenue. I just, in hindsight, it is the one thing, despite the twist absolutely shocking me when I was a kid and be like, oh my God, he's alive. Oh my God, he's the bad guy. You know, I just thought when I realized what Mr. Phelps meant to the franchise, I'm like, wow, this is like having a Robin movie and Batman is the villain.
Yeah. Or Gordon is the corrupt cop.
Yeah. And it's like, you just don't do that. Like, it cheapens the character, and I think it ends it on a note that ends that character on a note that I don't think should have been the case. I
No, I can
almost
go along with that.
yeah, I almost sort of champion the idea that, like, why didn't Tom Cruise just play Mr. Phelps? Like, it's weird because the film, it's like you didn't have to be a like, how many, I guess, you got like the Star Trek movies that are continuing the legacy of the TV shows on the big screen, blah 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 blah. But like, you didn't have to do that. Mission Impossible hadn't been on the TV for it had a couple of TV movies in the 80s, I think, but that was about it.
That was about it, yeah.
You could have just done your own thing, and
And I suspect that people wouldn't remember those 80s TV movies. They would remember this. So I would suggest that for the sake of argument, it's been off the TV, it's been off your screen for 30 years by the time this is made. You know, put somewhere around that figure. So yeah, they could have not rebooted it but reinvigorated it.
Yeah,
I suppose.
Well, no, reboot would have been the thing. A cinematic reboot. This is your
a cinematic reboot. Yeah.
So, which happens loads. How many times did a TV show go and become a movie franchise that was nothing like that? The Batman, Adam West. Batman 89 was nothing like that. It didn't need to be. It didn't need to be a continuation of that shit.
Like, absolutely, no. Nobody wanted it either. And the Fall Guy is a great example. The Fall Guy is a great example of a 30, 40-year-old TV show that is remade for the big screen and just keeps the essence of it. You know, and the sort of basic idea of it. So they certainly could have done something like that. And it is a bit of a cheap twist.
It is.
Fondness for the TV series aside, just from a writing point of view, it is a bit of a cheap twist,
Yes.
And you can still have the sort of idea of I gave my all to this organization and now it's giving me nothing back and all that business. But then you strain into the plot of GoldenEye.
Yes.
So maybe there is some effort to sort of differentiate between it, because that's what GoldenEye is. That's what Alex Trevelyan is in GoldenEye.
Yes.
But that would have, if you'd done something like that, you would have been able to preserve the Phelps character as he was.
Yes.
And still have that same message.
Yes.
That the world has changed and is more cynical than it used to be.
Yeah. Or just Mr. Phelps dies in the movie.
Or Phelps dies, yeah. Phelps dies.
You do this sort of legacy thing where Cruise will carry on the torch as Ethan Hunt, but in this final mission, Mr. Phelps passes the buck,
Yeah.
And that would have also worked. But it was just such a cynical. It's borderline like insult, like The Last Jedi insulting. It's kind of on that level to some degree. And this is where it's one of those things was like, if I had never seen Star Wars, right, and I watched The Last Jedi first or something like that, and then went back and watched all of Star Wars, I'd be like, oh, I get why people are upset about that. Yeah, that was a silly thing to do, but I might not feel as frustrated by it knowing that I've watched Star Wars already.
Yeah, and this goes, I didn't feel frustrated by the Phelps twist in Mission Impossible. But as I said at the outset, I wasn't as vested in the original series as Martin Landau and Peter Graves were, and fans of that series are, and that's all to their credit. And if I were invested in that TV series to that extent, then I would probably hate this film more than I, much more than I actually do now.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
It's interesting.
Yeah, I think that's part of taking something that you love and doing the dirty to it. Is you're always going to feel like that. You're always going to feel. I remember, so I did have that feeling with Val Kilmer, rest in peace.
R.I.P.
His version of The Saint, because I was much more invested in The Saint And when
Okay.
his film of that came out, I thought this is an absolute travesty.
Yeah.
So I do understand why people have got a thing for the Phelps thing, but
Yes.
I didn't have that connection to the original series. So I see it as a typical 90s cheesy twist,
Yes.
that
It's
was 10 a penny in that decade.
it's tough because you, as the shepherd of a franchise, I mean, that's because we're in such a franchise heavy world now. I
Yeah.
mean, I have stopped watching Star Trek because the creator, the people in charge of this franchise at the moment, suck. Like, they
Yeah.
just suck. They don't produce anything good. The only thing good was season 3 of Picard, that was showrun by Terry Matalas, who worked on Star Trek in the 90s. It's the only season that was good. Everything else has literally been unwatchable, to in that same sort of Phelps twistiness of, like, do you not have any, like, just basic awareness of the franchise? So I feel
Yeah.
it with that. I feel it with Star Wars. I feel it
I
with
feel it with
Doctor
Star
Who.
Wars.
You see
Yeah.
it all the time. There's like, oh, we're gonna come in with our new ideas. Well, you can have your new ideas. That's fine, but maybe you also need to consider the fans who have been watching this show and keeping it alive for 60 years.
Yeah.
Was killing
Yeah.
James Bond a good idea? No Time to Die. Was making him like second rate in that film a good idea? Probably not.
No. No. I
But
agree with that. You've got to just because you're coming to it new and you want to do new things with it doesn't give you the right to totally ignore 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years worth of heritage
mm,
that has got you to the point that you're now at.
yes,
I feel that about Sherlock Holmes stuff. I feel that about Sherlock Holmes pastiches where he's, fighting Martians from War of the Worlds and things like that. And you think, what are you talking about? What is this? This is absolute nonsense. So I can understand Martin Landau. I don't agree with him, but for that reason. But
yes,
I can empathise with people like Martin Landau and fans of the show, thinking that this is, a tacky betrayal of what had
yes,
gone before. Definitely,
yes. I
definitely.
mean, I have a quote from Martin. Should we just read his
Yeah,
quote?
yeah, yeah. Because I've got it in front of me as well, I think. But go on.
Okay, so he says, when they were working on the early incarnation of the first one, not the script they ultimately did, they wanted the entire team to be destroyed, done away with done away with one at a time, and I was against that. It was basically an action adventure movie and not mission. Mission was a mind game. The ideal mission was getting in and out without anyone ever knowing we were there. So the whole texture changed. Why volunteer to essentially have our characters commit suicide? I passed on it. The script wasn't that good either.
Yeah, that's
And
a killer final line.
it is. And I this is what I mean. This is why I do sort of agree with the sentiment behind it. It's like, we were these characters, we were this show, and like you're now just sort of cheaply ripping it all up and throwing it out for what purpose?
Yeah,
Cheap shock value. Cheap
cheap
shock
shock
value.
value. Yeah,
And I
and this.
sort of get why they didn't come back. I get it.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. It looked at in that through that prism. I get it, and it is just that lust for a twist ending.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which you could argue it doesn't need. It doesn't need the twist ending because it's been such a thrill beforehand, leading up to this point, that it doesn't
Yeah.
really. It could just be a villain that he then.
Yeah.
It could be a villain in the story that we've already met,
Mm.
like what's the character's name that's head of the CIA, whatever it is.
Kittredge.
Kittredge, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, brilliant performance,
Oh
brilliant
my god. Yes.
performance. That, yeah. But
Yes.
it could have been him, and I
Mm.
don't think there would have been the it wouldn't have been to the movie's detriment that it turns out to be him.
No. No. I really think a Ethan, because here's the thing. Here's the thing. I mean, we're dogging on the film at the moment, but I do love the film. Ethan Hunt is a fantastic action hero. And
Yeah.
he is up there now in the pantheon of cinematic heroes. People know the name Ethan Hunt. They know
Yes.
who he is. He is like James Bond. He is like Jason Bourne. He's like Batman. Ethan Hunt is the hero.
Yes.
And Mr. Phelps was the hero. There was no reason why those two couldn't have worked together, those two as like duo, like, they're lone wolves together, they're whatever. They're on the mission together because everything else has fallen out around them and they need to solve this problem to, save whatever needs to be saved, right?
Yeah.
And the villain, the ultimate villain, I mean, because it still could be someone within the team. Someone else could have faked their death. Someone else could have been behind it. I just don't think it needed to be Mr. Phelps. Just,
No, I agree. Yeah,
it just
I
didn't
can
need
see
to
the
be
logic of that. I can see how that would also, and like I say, it wouldn't harm the film. It wouldn't change anything fundamental about the film or its entertainment value.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think it is just that shock that they were going for, and maybe it was mistimed.
I think so. It's I get the, and the franchise has moved on so far from this film that no one remembers this. We're talking about
No,
Mission Impossible films. No one's talking about Mission Impossible, the TV show. It's, it's the franchise has evolved and morphed into something else entirely now. It is very much not like the TV show, and I love the show. I think it's fun. I love popping in the episodes and watching them. I got the box set. It's good fun, but it is pretty much nothing like,
no,
what
it's
the
become its
films
own. It's now become its own franchise. It's sort of a franchise out of a franchise.
Yes,
and it does its own thing, and that's fair. That's fair enough. I think that's fair because it does it well, by and large.
Yes. So one of the other problems it has, since we're kind of dogging on problems, is I had a very big problem with the character of Claire. Now, in one respect, she is the femme fatale.
Yeah.
And she works really well as the femme fatale because there is this sense of romance between her and Ethan. There is zero sense of romance between her and John Voight.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to call it Mr. Phelps. It's just John Voight. Like, no.
Yeah.
Gross.
It's really creepy, isn't it? Looking back, that's really creepy.
Yeah, like I don't even know what their age differences is. Just that she just looks so much better, and he just looks so old and sleazy. Like I just,
absolutely.
Ugh. It's probably why it was easier to stomach Mr. Phelps as the villain because it was John Voight. Like that probably added to my be like, yeah, okay, John Voight can go. He's bye. But
well, there's about 25 years difference between them.
Is there? Okay, that's a pretty big difference. Okay,
that's a good difference.
All right,
yeah,
all right,
that's a good difference.
So initially, when they were, bashing out the script of this, there actually was a love triangle between Phelps, Claire, and Ethan. And interestingly enough, it was George Lucas, who was like, "Do not do this.
Don't do this."
and I think they should have done it. Because it makes sense because she is the femme fatale. It makes sense that she would use her feminine wiles to manipulate and control Ethan, who is very susceptible and on edge at this point in time. It also would have made sense why Phelps kills her at the end of the movie. End of the film. Because it makes no sense why he shoots her.
Yeah, it's interesting you saying all this because I must have already had these thoughts, the exact same thoughts you've just set out there. Because when I sat down to watch this, I was convinced that was I was convinced that happened.
You know why?
Go on.
I bet you I know why. In the trailers, there are scenes that were cut of Ethan and Claire making out.
Maybe it was a subconscious memory of the trailers then.
Yes.
But I just put it down the other night when I watched it. I put it down to thinking, well, maybe I was so convinced of that because the last time I watched it, I thought the same thing. And then I've just been subconsciously saying to myself, that would make the film stronger than it already is.
Yes.
So when I sat down to it, I was thinking, I remember this. Ethan's been like having an affair with her, hasn't he? I remember all this. But none of that happened.
No.
I was a bit flummoxed for a while. But but because I think it would make it better. I agree. I think Lucas was wrong.
I think
Lucas
so.
was wrong.
Yes.
And it gives Phelps a double motive, doesn't it? It gives Phelps a double motive for framing Hunt.
Yes.
And killing Claire, like you say.
Exactly.
His plan makes more sense if he's jealous of Ethan Hunt.
Exactly. This young hotshot who's boning his wife. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. That's exactly what it needed.
It would also explain the age difference to a certain extent in that, because
yes,
he is the young stud that's coming in to take over command. You know, in
yes,
all
exactly,
aspects of Phelps's life.
exactly.
Bum note from
Because
Lucas that.
yes, I mean, he's not the best.
Yeah, he has good ideas, doesn't he?
Yes,
He has good setups,
yes,
but then he
yes.
should just pass them to other people to develop.
I think so. Because the other thing is with Claire, it's like, well, we find out on the train scene after after all the team has been destroyed and Ethan meets up with Claire back at the safe house and they're trying to find out what the next move is going to be, and it's like, well, he meets with Max, Ethan Hunt meets with Max, and da 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 da. Then the whole plan is they're going to break into CIA headquarters and steal the knock list, the famous knock list.
The knock list, yeah.
And that's when he has the train meeting with Luther Stickle, played by Ving Rhames, and Krieger, played by Jean Reno.
Yeah.
Both fantastic. In that train scene, Ethan says, Ethan says to Krieger, oh, well, Claire says you're the best. Okay, Claire's the one who set Krieger up to be part of this mission.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. The other thing that would have made this stronger is Ethan's like, we need people who are on our side. Look, I know some people who are in the IMF who will back me up. And she needs to say, you can't compromise your friends. Let's go to the disavowed list. She needed to be the one to instigate Ethan going to the disavowed list so that she could plant Krieger. And then, because the other thing that kind of doesn't make sense is after they've like stolen the knock list and they're in London outside Liverpool Underground Station, Krieger has the knock list, and he, there's that kind of misdirection with the sleight of hand magic stuff that happens. Yeah. And then after Ethan gets the disc back, he then gives it to Luther, and Luther's like, why are you giving this to me? He's like, well, I trust you because you wouldn't have, signed up for this if you knew what you're getting into. Well, that doesn't make sense, Ethan, because he knew what he was signing up. He knew exactly who he was signing up to. Like, yeah. So there's this sort of, I mean, I love the fact that Luther becomes a main character throughout the whole franchise, but there is a kind of a flimsiness to their friendship that needed a few more scenes of trust to be built for him to be willing to give the knock list to him and trust him implicitly.
Yeah, because that is
over Claire.
Yeah, because you're absolutely right on that. That line doesn't make sense because he does know what he's getting into, and it's one of those things where you think that there is something, that there's a character point there, but it needs another couple of rewrites to make that stronger than it is.
Yes.
Sometimes you write a clue, don't you? It isn't quite right because you think, well, hang on, if I really sit back and think about this, that doesn't get my character to where I want him to be. Not really. Yeah. It's almost there, but it's not quite, and it just needs tightening up. And this is an example of that. Of that.
Yes.
And it needed either that that line to make more sense, or to recruit Luther in a different way, perhaps, or something, or as you say, maybe even as well, just one more exchange between Hunt and Luther that says some history between them.
Yeah,
that he knows Luther's a good guy and he can trust him. It needs just a little bit more.
Yeah,
because it is sort of skirted over, isn't it?
Yes, because they're both Krieger and Luther are disavowed for committing crimes. So Luther acknowledges that he committed the crimes. So he's a criminal.
Yeah. He's a criminal. That's right.
He deserves to be disavowed, and obviously he's redeemed by the end of this movie. But in terms of a redemption arc, he doesn't have a redemption arc.
No, he doesn't. No, because Hunt doesn't allow him to have one. Yeah. Hunt should distrust both of them, really.
Yes.
Or distrust neither of them. It doesn't work when with one or not the other, because they're essentially on a level playing field, aren't they?
Yes. Or this is where you go back to the Kittredge being the villain, and did Kittredge frame Luther for something to get him disavowed?
Well.
And then you go back, because the thing is with Kittredge, again, played by Henry. How does he pronounce his name?
I don't know how
Czerny?
you pronounce
Cena?
it.
Whatever.
Czerny? I don't know, but
Czerny. He's fantastic. Like is it clear and
in this
present
sort of
danger?
role.
Yes.
He's brilliant because he's in Clear and Present. Is he in Clear and Present Danger?
He's
Or
in one of the
other
two. It's either Clear and Present Danger or it's Clear and Present Danger. There's that wonderful like email off which is so tense it's so tense, and it's just like
brilliant.
typing on a computer between Harrison Ford and his character, and he's wonderful in this role. But the thing is, again, this is where I kind of understand like Towne and David's issues with the clarity of it, and some of the reviews as well. Is Kittredge is a dick to Ethan in that incredibly great scene in that restaurant.
In the restaurant, yeah.
And it's because Kittredge thinks that he's the mole.
Yeah.
He thinks he's caught his bad guy. He hasn't, but he thinks it, and that's why he's so nasty.
Mm-hmm.
As the film progresses, and he needs to be realizing that Ethan isn't the bad guy, his attitude towards Ethan we don't see that change.
We don't see it change, no. We don't see it change.
To the point to where when we catch up with Kittredge again, and because he is in Dead Reckoning Part 1, he's still a dick.
Right.
And you're like, wait, I don't understand. Like, your character needs to not be exactly the same at the end of the movie, because while it is fantastic performance throughout the whole film, at some point your character needs to change slightly towards Ethan. Ethan.
And there's no acknowledgement that he's got it wrong about Ethan either, because he when he says you're not the only, when he says to Phelps, you're not the only one, I'm not the only one that's seen you alive, and Kittredge is on the watch thing. You know, there's nothing after that for him to say to Ethan.
No,
sorry, mate.
Exactly.
I've made a grave error here of judgment.
Yes.
So thanks very much. There's nothing.
Yes.
There's nothing.
No.
You know, now
no. I mean, they
freed
freed his mom, freed his uncle. He's, he's free. Like Ethan tells us this has happened at the pub with Luther.
There's too much sort of wrapping up in us. That dialogue's never really rung true to me, because they wouldn't talk like that to each other, would they? That's pure audience.
Yes.
Info.
Yes.
And I would rather see it. I mean, I can take for granted that there would be a sort of comedic exchange between Kittredge and Hunt if they had a thank you moment, and Kittredge walks off and Hunt has to say, "You are going to release Uncle Bob, aren't you?" or whatever he's called.
Yeah.
Uncle Donald. Uncle Donald. Yeah. You are going to release him, aren't you? And Kittredge sort of, giving a look or something. That'd have been quite a nice comic exchange to remind us about that, and to say, of course he is. He has to.
Yes.
But just having Ethan and Luther talk about it over 2 pints of beer. I don't accept that Ethan Hunt drinks pints of beer either. He doesn't strike me as that sort of fella.
No. I know where that pub is, though. It's just kind of it is near Tower Bridge-ish area, or London Bridge area.
I think I've been in it,
Yeah.
I think I've been in it.
It looks exactly the same. It looks exactly the same as it did then. But yeah, no, they should have, and I think I understand these viewers and reviewers' response to some of these problems, and even the original cast's problem with this movie and stuff. It's like, everyone is sort of, personality-wise, everyone is sort of a bit sort of cliched in their roles. Ethan is the incorruptible hero, and that's just who he is.
Incorruptible,
and it just sort of,
that's a good word. Incorruptible is a good word, yeah.
And Claire's just she is the femme fatale, but it's just sort of half. It's a halfway house femme fatale. She's like she's doing the things, but we don't see a lot of what she's doing, and you're just sort of like, but like, why? Like, there should be more visceral stuff with her. I think of like Kathy Moffat in Out of the Past. Like, she is kind of that femme fatale, but she doesn't go with it. She's not allowed to go as far and be as shocking as because even when Claire dies, she's like, no, Jim, don't kill Ethan. And you're like, are we meant to be like feel that you're a good person now? Because you're not. You've been in
And
on this, Claire.
when Ethan and Phelps have met up in the tube station, when he makes the phone call to Kittredge, and they're sitting having a cup of coffee, and I mean I quite like it as a sequence where Ethan you see Ethan working it out by reenacting the scenes.
It's a great scene.
Great scene. And he reenacts it in his head as Claire blowing up the car. What's that agent's name? Hannah.
Hannah.
And then he says, "No.
Can't be.
The mole could have done that himself." And then it switches to John Voight doing it as he crawls out of the river.
Yes.
And I thought, isn't it more satisfying if Claire has done it?
Well, this is the problem. This is the problem with the relationship.
Yeah, that's right.
At this point in the film, her hook should be so deep in Ethan that he can't imagine her as the villain.
Yeah.
But it needs to come out that she is the one who blew up the car. Because we actually don't know. We don't know which one of those two did it.
We don't know.
The film is ambiguous on that.
Yeah, and it becomes a sort of chauffeur in the Big Sleep, doesn't it? We don't know who killed.
Yeah.
We know who killed all the others.
Yes.
And that sequence is so good.
It is.
This one little detail lets it down a little bit, or quite a lot actually.
Yeah.
And that's never resolved. But I want that to be what happened. I want to be told that she did do it.
Yeah.
Because then
in my head she is.
She fulfills her agency. Yeah, in mine too. That's what I. Yeah. But I only say that the film doesn't confirm it for me. I only say it because I think that is the one that is most satisfying. You know, otherwise, like Phelps is just a total mass murderer.
Yes.
And I don't buy that his detonator would work when he'd been in the river anyway.
No. Because then also the other reason why I strongly believe that she's the one who did it and Ethan got that right is the way he interacts with her the rest of the film is different. He interacts with her as if she is a villain now.
Yeah.
He's very standoffish with her. You know, he's suspicious of her, you know, oh, please come here, Ethan, blah, blah, blah. You know, and he's just sort of like, no, I need to get away from you. Like, he knows that she did it. And that's why they needed to just be, you know, you don't need to like tell everything, but I do think that was one thing that they should have clarified.
I think they should have clarified it. It's a loose end otherwise, isn't it? It's a loose end.
Yes,
you can only sort of judge it on what you would have done yourself, and I would have had her
definitely
be the killer. You know,
yeah,
definitely,
yeah.
It makes much more sense. It's much more satisfying.
No, absolutely, yes. That was. I think in terms of like the problems with the overall story, I think it really comes down, and this is where I do agree with Towne and them, where it's shuffling different people's ideas to sort of make this work. And I think when you look at Claire and her role and Phelps and his motivation and a little bit of the stuff with Luther Stickle, like they are the ones that sort of feel their plot lines and their character arcs are the most unclear at times. Like their motives are suspect because, you know, and again, this film is iconic. This is an iconic 90s movie because it has some incredibly cool visuals to it.
Yeah.
Down to De Palma doing some people criticize the overuse of Dutch angles, but I swear that scene in the restaurant when they're in Prague, the close-ups, the massive close-ups in Dutch angle against Ethan and against Kittredge as it's getting closer and closer, and Ethan's doing that thing where you see that he's so smart. He's like, "Why is there another team? Why was there another team?" And Kittredge is like, "Wait, what?" And he's like, the guy behind you, man, and these people behind you, I saw them in the place." And it's like, yeah, it's cool because you get to see him be smart and be the detective and piece things together, and seeing their faces in another context like rejigs his memory. Like, I've seen this face. Where have I seen it? Oh my god, they were there. Now they're here. This is me caught in a trap. Shit.
Yeah, it's also good that it replays the scenes that he's remembering, so that you can see that the film has played absolutely fair with you because they are there.
They are there, and they're all. If you look, they are all either staring. They're all staring at the characters.
At the characters,
so when we're in Ethan's point of view, before we see him in the little senator makeup, the two agents are staring directly at him. I mean, it's a bit obvious, but it's not obvious the first time you watch the film.
Not the first time you watch it. No, it's very cleverly done.
Yeah,
it's one of those. I always talk about being fair, fair play in crime writing, so that the reader can solve
Mm.
it and have a go at solving it themselves in certain types of crime writing. And I like it when films do it like this. So when it reveals something that you've already seen and it shows it you again, but with a bit more information, you can say, I should have spotted that.
Yes.
You know, and the next time you watch it, you're looking out for it, and that's when you notice that they are all looking at the team. It's a beautiful little detail.
Yes, yes. So it's things like that. I mean, and then obviously like the blowing up of the of that restaurant and the fish tank, like that's such a visceral, fun, big moment. And this film is full of this is why even though there's honestly some really big kind of plot issues and character issues, you are still having fun because it's a bit like a janky car. It runs, it holds together, but it's a little bit it's kind of dodgily hung together. But it will get you from A to B and you'll have a fun time because the stereo is really good and the air conditioning
it's doing
works.
its job. It's doing its
you know
job.
What I mean?
You know, yeah. It's doing its job. And that sequence is fantastic. It's no coincidence that was all over the trailers.
Yes.
Because that, you know, and Cruise doing it, one of the first Cruise own stunt work, you know, doing it himself that he's now famous for. Because I think there was a real risk he could have drowned in all that water, you know. And I think De Palma had said to him, "Can you do it? Because the stunt double doesn't look right." And it was he asked Cruise to do it, and Cruise went, "Yeah, okay." He said, "Well, you might drown because there was like a massive amount of water in that tank."
Yes.
You know, and Cruise was just like, "Give it a go."
Yeah.
I
well,
admire
apparently
that.
the explosion scene was Cruise's idea. He wanted that.
He wanted
that scene, which is it's like, you're nuts, man. Like if he was making this film today, he would have literally had a helicopter chase a train into a tunnel.
Yeah, he would. Yes, he would. Yeah, he would.
You know, and there's so many good scenes. I mean, obviously the CIA break-in scene is great. And I mean, you know, kind of piggybacking onto that, but also like some of the issues once they determine they're going to break into the CIA, I would say they're in and they're out of getting inside and out of Langley is pretty damn simple and a bit too easy.
Too easy, yeah.
But the tension is about the office, that office scene of being suspended down. You know, that is the big tension. So they didn't want to give, you know, and this is where it's like you could have added 5-10 more minutes to the runtime of this by having them, how are they going to get out? But it's just sort of like, oh, they get out, they get in and they get out. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's like,
they do get better at that as the series goes on, don't they?
Massively.
They do improve on that.
Yes. This film, 1996 Mission Impossible, lays the foundation for everything that happens afterwards, and genuinely just gets. I think in general, I think it just gets better along the way. You know, the way they sort of maneuver these plots and you know, get characters in and out of situations and, you know, make that feel just a bit more, you know, like for example in the second film when Ethan is cornered in the pharmaceutical building, he just jumps out the place because he's got a parachute on his back. You know, it's like that's how we got out. His plan was to parasail out of that place, and that's what he does.
There's a definite feeling here of the filmmakers saying getting in and out isn't what matters. What matters is being suspended over that floor. That's the scene that we're invested in. The rest of it is just, well, he just does, they just do, don't they? And that can work sometimes, but very often you sort of say, well, you've got to give me something. You know, I'm willing to buy into this ridiculous stunt that you're about to pull off.
But
you've got to give me, you've got to ground me somehow. You know, give me something to go along with.
After they get the knock list and they're getting out of there, they just sort of smash cut to them, all the firemen rustling Claire, you know, out the building for some reason, and then they're just driving away. I'm like, why is this fire truck driving away when you've set up that there's a fire?
That's
on the premise.
That's not good. It's not good, is it? just a bit more thought into that, you know. Because it only needs a diversion, wouldn't it? That's all it needs.
Exactly. This is where it's like They could have left. They should have all left in like suits rather than
Yeah,
as firemen, and then
yeah,
Luther picks them up in a car. You know what I mean? Something like that.
yeah.
Would have been kind of made more sense. But this is where you can kind of really feel the idea that they are riding towards set pieces. So this set piece is done. We got to get out of here now. All right, they're out. They're gone.
That's it.
Bam.
Yeah,
Done.
that's what I mean by it doesn't really matter how they get in and out. We
Yep.
What we're interested in is him suspended over this floor that's going to give him away at any moment,
Yes.
which
Now,
is still a fabulous sequence. And I
totally. It's iconic.
no matter how many times I watch it, I'm still sort of biting my nails,
Yeah.
thinking it somehow it fools you into thinking is he gonna get out of this, even though you know
Yeah.
he is.
Yeah.
Brilliant piece of
The tension in that
suspense
scene is
filmmaking.
fantastic. And
Yeah,
like when Krieger has to kill the rat,
the
and
rat.
then rat messes up the whole kind of rig to pull him up, and the whole like
Yeah,
sound thing. It's like it is, and he's sweating, and if his sweat
and
drops
the
hits the
panic on
ground,
his
like,
face. The
yeah,
panic on his face. Cruz sells that
yes,
100% for me, definitely.
yes, yeah.
And
It
his
is
his
so
arms
fun.
his arms are moving around like this.
Yeah,
Desperately trying to find somewhere that he can sort of steady himself. It
yeah.
really is good. Really is
He's got
good.
to steady himself, and he's got to keep himself away from the floor because he's so close to just being like so close. And this is why I think this is why people can just watch this film and not necessarily think too deeply about the construction of the plot, and walk away, like you said, like with a smile on your face, because issues aside, you are having a fun ride
Yeah,
from start to finish. And the
yeah,
finale, that train scene, it's insane, but it's so much fun.
yeah. Absolutely. This is the sort of film that my dad would say. Um, he used to say things like, if somebody, I might say, why does Indiana Jones's hat never come off, for example, and
Mm.
he would say, if you need to ask questions like that, you're watching the wrong film. You know,
Yes.
this isn't the sort
Yeah.
of film where you should be worrying about stuff like that. So,
No.
and I sort of feel like that about the escape in the fire truck and how they
Yes.
get
Yes.
in and all the rest of it. Doesn't really. If you're going to watch it on that level, which we do, I mean, people like you
Yes.
and I do it, then it is a problem. But your average Joe sitting in a movie theater is just going to be having a great time, and that's why this film works for me, because it's unashamedly. It says to that person in the movie theater, I'm glad you've had a good time.
Mm.
It says to
Yes.
me and you've had a good
Yes.
time despite the things that you think are wrong with it. And we have to
Yes.
say, yeah, we have. you know,
Yes.
I have a great admiration for films that are willing to do that and not take themselves too seriously.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I'm absolutely like.
Like the Donner Superman. The Donner Superman
Mm.
knows it's ridiculous, but it doesn't ask anything of you other than to believe, and I
Mm.
do.
I
I do.
believe a man can fly. It's
I
true.
do, still do.
It's true. Yeah.
And this is just saying to me, you will be on the edge of your seat, and I am.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
it's a great achievement, really.
It is. In terms of the building of suspense, every scene feeling suspenseful and shocking. I mean, the dream scene where
Mm,
he's been up all night sending emails to chat rooms, trying to find who the hell this Job is and Max, and thinking that might be the answer to finding her. It's a bit of a thin stretch, but I'll buy it. Whatever, it's fine. But when the ghost of Mr. Phelps comes in, Ethan, I needed you, Ethan. And he's got the bloody hand coming at him,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
he
yeah,
and he jolts awake when Claire touches him. There's a subconscious thing going on here where it's like, that's evil. And she is also evil. Like, you need to, he kind of knows that what is happening isn't right. This shouldn't be happening. She shouldn't be here. He shouldn't be here. Like, that's a terrific scene. But also, just like I had mentioned as well, even when he gets back to the safe house and he does really simple shit, like
yeah. He
unscrew
does.
the light bulb, break it, and then dish out the pieces
Yeah,
outside the room so that he'll hear the glass crunching. Like, it's these little things that it makes me think, he's smart, he's capable,
yeah,
and I want to get behind him winning because he's not behind the bad stuff. And just that sort of sheer, like, cheering for the hero to win that's so strong in this film that it's very easy to, again, easy to look past some of these issues that we've been talking about, because
Very much so.
Cruise is
Yeah.
such a powerhouse in this, and Ethan Hunt is such a cool character.
He's a
I
good,
love
yeah,
Ethan
he's a
Hunt.
great character. I do.
I wanted
do.
to be
And
Ethan Hunt more than I wanted to be Bond when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Did.
Well, I couldn't say that, but certainly now I'd rather be Ethan
Mm.
Hunt now than James Bond, who now is just like a mopey old fart, isn't he? You know, just like I'd rather have. Whereas Ethan Hunt is aged over the films, obviously, but I still believe he's it's the same fella, sort of
Yes,
thing.
and
You know,
Cruise
and I
does do
still
his own stunts, so it
and
is
Cruise does do
definitely
his own
him.
stunts. Yeah, yeah. So I agree, and the light bulb thing is like in early Bond when he used to take a lock of his hair and put it across the wardrobe in the hotel rooms.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
simple things that show resourcefulness, cleverness, prepared
Yes.
for any eventuality, but also experience, because he's learnt this trick from previous missions, sort of thing, you know, or from other double O's or other agents in this case.
Yeah.
And they're just nice little character touches that tell you a little bit about Ethan Hunt that, you know, that also serve a purpose in terms of story, in that someone is going to come in to this room. It's obvious someone is going to come into this room and he's going to hear it. You know, little touches like that I'm all for. And we don't really get them anymore, do we? There aren't very many of them in these big blockbusters anymore. It's all too done with a sledgehammer for my liking.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think the cleverness of how he sets stuff up and works things out and plans for things is I don't want to say it's like a lost art, but it's something we don't see as often. I don't think. In spy movies we don't see it as often, for sure.
No, I don't think we do. I don't think we do,
like,
definitely.
You know, I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything like smart that James Bond has done.
No.
After Casino Royale, like other than that, like I can't think of. It's like he's poisoned. Okay, he's dark, you know, down in salt water because he needs to throw up. He's thinking fast. Great, awesome. After that, I'm like, I can't think of any other moment in the franchise where he's thinking like that quickly with something like that's like a simple. I don't know, but yeah.
Not in Craig's tenure. Definitely not in Craig's tenure.
No.
But in almost all of the others, I could, if I thought about it, I could come up with examples of that.
Yes.
You know, thinking on your feet and all the rest of it. But
now,
Hunt is by far the biggest competitor to James Bond for me in cinema, and there are times when I do prefer him. I think he's a much better character.
Yes. Yeah. My go-tos, I would watch Mission Impossible and I'd watch the Bourne trilogy before I'd watch a Craig Bond movie.
Yeah.
That is my go-to.
I would. I'd agree with that. I'm not saying that I'd watch these before I'd watch a Connery or even a Brosnan, even a Moore. But
I would definitely watch anything over. I'd watch Paint Dry over a Moore film.
I'm the right generation for thinking Roger Moore is James Bond.
He is terrible.
But I, you know, I would certainly choose this over Daniel Craig any day of the week. Any day of the week.
Now, interestingly enough, there is a sort of Bondy-esque connection in that the U2, Bono and The Edge, wrote the song Goldeneye that was performed by Tina Turner. Larry Mullen and Adam Clayton, the other bandmates of U2, wrote and composed the theme song that is used in the film soundtrack and used in the end credits of the film. So it's very interesting and funny to me that one year, 1995, you have Bono and The Edge with Goldeneye. The following year, you have the other two U2 bandmates working on Mission Impossible, these two big, massive spy franchises. And I remember absolutely loving this sort of like club version of the theme tune that plays during the end credits. It's a bit cheesy now and quite dated, but as a kid, when I was watching it, I was like, oh, I love this. I just loved it. It's a bit cheesy, but the credit version of the theme tune that they did just has always stuck with me for whatever reason.
Yeah, well, I've always been a fan of the original theme tune.
Oh God, yeah.
Which, of course, it's already asking to be made into like a,
Well,
to
you
be
know why?
sampled.
Yes, yeah.
You know,
Oh yes.
but Lalo Schifrin's one of the best for me. His soundtracks are absolutely fabulous, particularly his Dirty Harry soundtracks. If people have
Yes.
not listened to those, then they are well worth a listen.
They are. They are. No, that the Mission Impossible theme tune is a fantastic rival to the Bond theme. Like they're both
Oh yeah,
instantly
yeah,
iconic. And I think I was a little bit disappointed. I wasn't disappointed with Danny Elfman's score. I think the score for this film is very, very good. And it's very un-Elfman like, which I
yes,
appreciate. I actually think that
yes.
was a good choice. The thing that I was sort of just mildly disappointed of it's that 90s thing where we're not going to indulge too much in the TV show. And there's the other classic theme, that bum ba-dum, 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 that is in the TV show all the time.
All the
You
time. Yeah, yeah,
only hear it slightly in the very opening scene.
yeah,
It is just slightly there. And it's almost like we know people of the show will recognize this, but we're not going to give them very much of it. It's kind of like the first Star Trek movie being a little bit afraid to use the original theme tune, which it does very in the motion picture. They only
yeah.
use it sparingly, and it's like just use it.
Well, it's the same with the most recent series of Van der Valk, which isn't very good. But I don't think they ever use the famous Van der Valk theme tune, which was a #1 hit in the 70s. You know, I mean, that's one of the most famous TV themes of all time.
Yes,
And it's I can only think it's for the same reason. Well, that's a bit dated.
yes,
You know, it's a bit cheesy, and we
yeah,
want to be up to date and cutting edge.
yeah,
But you're overlooking the fact that almost everyone sitting down to watch this TV show is going to expect to hear it. You know,
exactly. And what's nice is the franchise begins to use it. I think it's from 3 onwards. It
yeah,
becomes incorporated into the script or into the soundtrack and is used in very, very fun ways. And so I sort of like that it has that sort of 90s-ness of, you know, we're just gonna sort of we gotta stay away from some of that stuff because it's too TV show. You can just sort of feel it, like with certain, once things become a movie and they become serious. This is a movie now.
yeah,
This isn't a TV show. You kind of
yeah.
get that a
But
little bit.
but you are making a movie of a TV show.
You are,
You
but
know, I mean, I can't
it's
remember. I can't remember the film well enough. But
mm.
does the A-Team film have the A-Team theme
Oh,
tune in
I
it?
don't think I've ever seen the A-Team film. I have no
I
interest
think I've only
in
ever seen
watching
it
that.
once,
Yeah,
twice
yeah,
maybe at a push, but I can't remember. But I mean that is what you're expecting to hear. So
yes,
it is a shame, and it is. You're right. It is good that they start to use it in subsequent films more, more prevalently, because it is. But both those things, both Mission Impossible themes, are iconic, and they
yeah,
are ones that have gone into public psyche. So if people are driving fast, they sing the Bond theme. If people are trying to balance too many
yes,
groceries on one arm, they sing the Mission Impossible theme. You know what I mean? That
yeah,
you sing it in everyday life. Well, I know I do. Maybe that says more
yes.
about me. But
No.
but
I
yeah,
agree.
it's become a piece of popular culture
Mm,
in its own right. So it should
yeah,
be embraced. I think if you're going to make a Mission Impossible film, you should
yeah,
embrace it. And
yes.
it was part of public culture in 1996. It's not
Oh,
as if it's
massively, of course.
so people will have known what it was and will have
Yes,
expected to hear it.
yes, yeah, yeah. So I think Elfman's score is very good, and I like listening to it. I do just wish he'd lent in a little bit more to some of the TV show themes, but still, it is still a very good score. I don't know. I think that's pretty much. I think we're down to maybe we should rate this thing.
Yeah, do you think? I
Yeah,
I mean, it is great fun.
it is.
We've dumped on it a little bit, but only where it deserves it, I think.
Yeah,
But
it
I think
it's a product of its time.
it's a product of its time, but I would want to stress that none of the problems detract from its overall enjoyment factor for me.
No,
Whereas
definitely.
some of the films that we've covered, the problems are so bad that you almost can't watch the film again.
Yes,
You know,
this is true, and I watch this on a regular. If not, I at least probably watch Mission Impossible 1 probably once a year. It somehow finds its way on my screen, and I enjoy it
yeah, it's one of
wholeheartedly.
those that if I see it's on, I say, well, I'll record it. Just we'll watch that one day. You know, because
Yeah,
it's always worth a watch. That's
definitely.
something else my dad used to say about certain films.
Yes.
Always
I
worth
mean,
watching.
like, it kinda like, when I mean, like, when we think of, like, it is a very 90s movie. We're talking about the decade that had, like, Speed and Armageddon and Die Hard 3 and The Fugitive. Like, this film is and Tom Cruise is, I mean, he has said that he makes these films for boys. They are,
Yeah,
however you want to, that's, we can discuss that stuff elsewhere. But, like, these films are action films with heroic aspirational heroes that, for the most part, is a very sort of male thing.
it's
That's
very late. Yeah,
there's
it
more
is.
male people, more males who are interested in this than there will be, ladies.
Yeah,
Not that ladies aren't interested, they are, but this sort of that
it's a
power
book.
fantasy thing that is Bond and is Ethan Hunt is,
Yeah,
and I think that's where these films like Speed, Die Hard, Mission Impossible are why they're so iconic, why they're so successful, because so many people want to put themselves in the shoes of the hero. They want to be this person and be
yeah,
that good
and
and
be that
as I
good,
said,
and be that
incorruptible.
resourceful, and be that intelligent, and be that
Yeah.
that quick to think on your feet. You know, and that's a quality I've always admired: the ability to think on your feet.
Yeah.
Um, and they are boys' own adventures. You know, the old comic. They are boys'
Yes.
own adventures, which
Yeah.
is what
It's true.
really what the Bond films were always, and certainly the Bond books were meant to be boys' own
Yes.
adventures for adults. But
Yes.
the films became more boys' own adventures for teenage kids and
Yes.
adults.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, products of its time. But it's one of it's overall it is done so well
Mm.
that it's one of the better examples of these 90s type of thriller. I'd
Yeah.
watch this before. I'd watch this over Speed any day of the week.
Oh, I
Although,
don't know. I would do it as a
although I
double
do
header.
enjoy, I do enjoy Speed, but I would,
Yeah.
I would watch this. I think mainly because of the detective element to it.
Mm.
And the
Cool.
sort of following the clues.
Sure.
But certainly, I've watched almost anything over Speed 2. But
I've never seen Speed 2, and I never want to.
oh well.
I never want to.
Be grateful you haven't, and feel sorry for those of us that thought
I
they were going to
remember
get
being a
something
kid.
more of the same.
I remember being a kid. I remember going to the library. I remember wanting to rent Speed. I remember them having Speed 2 and being like, "That's not Keanu Reeves. Fuck
Yeah.
this shit." And I put it back on the thing. I was like,
Yeah.
"I'm not watching it. Not
Yeah.
happening." As a kid, I
Foolishly.
knew once you replace your main actor with some second rate, lookalike, it's not the
Well,
franchise I want anymore, which is
yeah.
isn't.
Well, I went to the pictures to see Speed, loved it. When Speed 2 came out, I don't think I saw past the fact it was Speed 2 and
Mm,
Willem Dafoe. And
yeah.
I went and watched it, and they poking my eyes out with rubbing popcorn in my face to stop
Yep.
the bleeding. It's horrendous. Horrendous.
So
Right,
we
rating.
yes, so we rate all of our films out of 5 Falcons, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. What would you rate Mission Impossible 1996?
Um, and this is a solid 4 for me.
Fair enough.
I enjoy it every time I watch it. I enjoy the others every time I watch them, and this is a good starting point for me. I buy into the concerns that fans of the TV series will have, as we
Mm,
discussed. That isn't a factor for me personally.
mm,
I take the film on its own terms, but I do think there are some character and narrative issues that
mm,
it can't really overcome.
yeah,
But they don't spoil it so much that I'd want to knock 2 Falcons off. So
true.
I'm giving it a 4.
Yep, nope, it's a solid 4 for me. Part of that is colored by nostalgia, part of that is colored by just every time I watch it. I've been watching this film for, 30 years? And it's always entertaining,
Yeah,
and like you said, these issues that we have they're definite issues, but there is such a high level of enjoyment and such a great protagonist to follow that I'm behind it and I'm enjoying it the whole time.
Yeah.
So it's a solid 4 for me because it's a great film. And in the as we look at it now, there's so many nods to film noir throughout this, like Ethan Hunt being that loner individual, that sort of a lot of film noir heroes are can be quite incorruptible. I think of Spencer and Kenzie Milhone and Mike Hammer. They're sort of incorruptible heroes, and Ethan Hunt and a lot of the spy figures took a lot, early spy figures, Bond, whatever, took a lot from that kind of concept. And you see it here. Claire being the femme fatale, that your buddy being behind, the mystery, the twist, your buddy being behind the big, the big scam that's happening. It is so clearly there in this particular film that I think it warranted us having a bit of a discussion about. I don't think we'll do the whole franchise because I do think after 2,
No,
after 2, the films really become action adventure even more than they are spy films, in my opinion.
yeah, I agree with that.
This
for me, this is the one with the most noir elements. I think this has even more than in. I'll have to revisit 2 to see if what I'm about to say is actually true. But I think this has always been the one that I considered most noir than any of the others, including 2.
It is. 2 is there, but in a different sort of capacity. 2 is there in a what's that Mike Hammer film we watched a while back?
Kiss Me Deadly.
Kiss Me Deadly. Mission Impossible 2 is a bit like Kiss Me Deadly noir.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
That's where 2, I would say, is, obviously it's an ape on Notorious, but you could probably see some similarities with Kiss Me Deadly and
Kiss Me Deadly, right?
Outlandish ludicrousness of it all. But well, I think we have thoroughly investigated Mission Impossible 1996.
Yep,
So I think we can file this puppy away and put it back in the drawer, and we'll be back next week with another case. So, until then, remember to like and subscribe, and remember to take care walking down those mean streets. So we just want to give a quick shout out to our paying patrons. We have Steve from the Boxing Movie Podcast.
We have Garm 1981.
And we have Gregory Sandoval. They are our initial ground floor patrons. So if you want to join Mean Streets and become a patron and get access to cool perks, make sure you head over to our Patreon page and subscribe today for as low as $1 a month.